Santa Carla Day by Adam Marek. The young sharks were laid out in enormous paddling pools on the boardwalk, 3 of them, each with a rubber hose stuck in the corner of its mouth. Their exposed backs and dorsal fins grew dull in the sunshine. Finch crouched beside the largest of them, the tiger shark, longer than he was tall and with a brutal girth. Stripes decorated its upper side like sunlight on the ocean floor. Finch's bent knee leaned into and buckled the edge of the pool, causing salt water to spill out across the hot boards. He pushed a thick needle into the shark's side, topping up the anaesthetic. Really, this should have been done within the cool darkness of the aquarium, but even these preparations were part of the Santa Carla Day show. It was important to build anticipation. On the low walls around the lagoon beside the Tolibaro aquarium, there were folks in their sandals, licking ice cream from their knuckles, taking photos. Finch made sure that as he worked on each of the sharks, he positioned himself so that the spectators would not go home with pictures of his back, but would see the full intensity of his concentration, the strength of his grip on the pliers, the sharks' mouths pulled open, and inside, the crystal garden of teeth, bone bright in the sun. A small rowing boat, overburdened with boys and deep in the water, pulled up to the steps. Seawater sloshed in as they rocked it this way and that, singing some fraternal shanty and goading one of their number to climb out onto the dock. Giving in to their jeers and their slaps on his back, the young boy plucked his hands from his baggy pockets and held them into the air, cheerfully defeated. He ran up the steps towards Finch, his flip-flops making a fine slapping sound that shot the whole way across Tolibaro Bay. The boy came close, hands in his hips, his shadow a bold arrow cast down at Finch's feet. "Hector," Finch gave a little upwards nod. "Come for a look?" "I thought they'd be bigger," Hector said, stroking his dark fringe back from his eyes. "Really?" Finch laughed. "Well, they'll look a lot bigger in the water when they're moving. This is the one to watch out for." Hector crouched down with Finch beside the mean wedge of the tiger shark's head. Water from the hose spilled out through its gills. "This is a female," Finch said. "Just a year old. Next summer she'll be twice as long again." Finch pulled the snout back. "See how the teeth flex forward like that," he said. "Whenever a tooth gets knocked out, another one swivels in to take its place." Hector reached out to touch the serrated front edge of a tooth, but hesitated. "It's okay," Finch said. "She won't wake up. See how the teeth are shaped like a can opener? There's a part for puncturing and a part for sawing. Out in the ocean they eat big old turtles. They go through those tough shells like a spoon through the top of a creme brulee." At the moment that Hector touched fingertip to tooth, someone behind him, one of his friends, screamed loudly, and the other 4 all laughed, bounding up the steps, full of vim. "If you want to help us, boys," Finch said, "you can fill those buckets and pour water over their backs." They looked at each other for a moment, and then, giggling, squabbled over the buckets, of which there were only 4, between 5. Something about being entrusted with this responsibility sobered the boys. They emptied the buckets over the length of the 2 bull sharks with gentle reverence, taking special care over the sharks' faces, their unclosing eyes and their cruel mouths, which dribbled fresh blood when disturbed. "It feels rough," Hector said, his hand now on the tiger shark's head. "Rough enough to take your skin off," Finch said, Tigers circle you, bump you, slap you with their tails. They move slow, then zip in lightning fast. That tall dorsal fin helps them turn in tight circles. They come at you in quick blasts. Sometimes they're so fast you don't know you've been bit till they're way off already. And then when you think they're gone and you see the fin swivel in the water, they come back. Where's the best place to hit them with the paddle? Finch laughed. On the day you'll be so scared you won't have the mind to find a target and hit it. I'm not scared. No? Well, in that case, when you strike, the only vulnerable areas are the eyes and the gills. Give them a good enough whack and they'll leave you alone. But is that what you want? How do you mean? Well, the whole town will be watching you. You've been chosen over every other kid in Tolibaro. You've got to give them a good show. How you perform will set how they all see you for the rest of your life. Do you want to be the boy who hit the sharks accurately, bop bop bop, and scared them away, only to stand there looking like an idiot for the remainder of the 71 seconds? Or do you want to be the boy who had the epic battle, who, when the sharks went at him, took it like a man? Hector stared at the sunlight flashing on the surface of the water. They can't hurt you anyway, Finch said. No, really. However bad they attack, you'll walk out of there red and sore, of course, but with just a few bruises. That's what you want, isn't it? When you walk out the pool, you want to look like you've survived an ordeal. You want everyone to look at you and think, I would never have the balls to do that. On Santa Carla Day, you'll be the king of the town. Better to look like you earned it, don't you think? Hector smiled. Finch widened the mouth of the shark, propping its snout up with his elbow, the heel of his hand on the lower jaw. 100 teeth fanned forwards, and Hector backed away from the smell. Finch clamped one of the big front teeth with his pliers, and with a practised curl of his wrist, plucked it and dropped it onto the boards. Can I keep that? Hector said, picking up the tooth and wiping the blood from it with his thumb. Sure, Finch said. You can have a whole bucket full if you like, once I've got the rest out. He set the pliers to the next tooth and pulled. Finch came home to the sound of thumping upstairs. His wife, Nina, was at the sink, scouring limescale from the bottom of a big glass vase. The radio was turned up, way too loud. What's going on? He asked. I told him he had to pick up his socks from the bottom of the stairs and put them in the wash basket, Nina said. That was all. Oh, Finch said. When he reached past Nina to fill a pint glass with cold water, he noticed red rake marks on her arms. Did he do that? He asked. He's just been uncontrollable all day, she said. Maybe it's the heat. Finch took 3 big gulps from his glass and then headed towards the thumping, taking the steps 2 at a time. Don't make him worse, Nina said. In his room, Brodie was banging a felt-tip pen into a black and white picture of Superman, torn from a colouring book. Superman's cape and boots had been coloured in, neatly with red, but the rest of his body was the victim of a vicious felt-tip tattoo, which had torn through the paper, leaving him all chewed up. Hey, Finch said. Don't break your pen. Finch took the pen from Brodie. The tip of it had split open against the floorboards. Brodie growled at him, his face so red it looked swollen. Sweat was all over him, sticking his hair to his forehead, even rising in beads on the side of his nose. Shh, Finch said. We'll get you another pen. And then he whispered softly for Brodie to calm down, to take a deep breath, reassuring him that he would listen to his side of the story. Brodie slumped down onto the bed, his arms crossed, wearing a professional pout. Finch sat next to him. "Mummy wouldn't find me a yellow pen," Brodie said, "and I need a yellow for Superman's belt and badge." "Okay, well, we'll find you a yellow," Finch said. "But did Mummy ask you to do something first? Before she found you a yellow?" "I don't want to pick up my stupid socks." Finch put his arm round Brodie's shoulders, but the boy was too hot, his t-shirt damp and stinky. "Let's get some fresh air in here," Finch said. "How can you colour with the curtains closed?" Finch opened the curtains and window, allowing light and cool air to intrude on Brodie's gloom. With the patience of a hostage negotiator, Finch discussed with Brodie the terms of their agreement, and by degrees Brodie calmed down, taking in big breaths, eventually smiling. "When we find the yellow pen," Brodie said, "will you help me colour in Superman, Daddy?" "Sure I will," Finch said. "But first, you're going to apologise to Mummy. You can't hurt her like that, Brodie. You cannot scratch her. You're nearly 13. Look at how strong you're getting now." They marched down the stairs together, Finch's hand on Brodie's shoulder. In the kitchen, Brodie made a remorseful curl of his lower lip and pulled on the back of Nina's shirt. "Sorry, Mummy," he said, and held out his arms for a hug. Nina hugged back, keeping her dripping, wet, washing up gloves at a distance. "That's all right, baby," Nina said. "Just please don't do it again." "I won't," Brodie said. Finch wished he could believe it. The three sharks performed lazy circles of the tank, the slow undulations of their tails propelling them round at an even speed, their heads moving from side to side, sniffing for some distraction from the endless conveyor. Finch tossed 3 shovelfuls of bloody mackerel chunks from a washing up bowl, and where they hit, the sharks whipped up to the surface in a froth with their tails. "Don't feed them too much," Doc Ortiz said from the doorway. "Don't want them boring in the morning." "They just need a little, just to keep them keen," Finch said, shaking Ortiz's hand when he held it out. "So you're all set for tomorrow," Ortiz said. "I'm just about to pull out the regrowths. It's amazing how quick the teeth start to come back." "Well, I just came to give you this," Ortiz said, holding out a soft parcel wrapped in brown paper. "Thanks. We're all going to wear them tomorrow." Finch unwrapped the paper, and inside was a red t-shirt with the words, "Go Hector, Santa Carla Day, 23/8/1975, stencilled on in black. "Do you mind if I stay and watch you?" Doc Ortiz asked. "Sure," Finch said. He sat down the shirt on the trestle table where his pistol was laid out, alongside the plastic tub of darts with the word Tranks written in faded marker on the side. "How's that boy of yours doing?" Ortiz asked. "He's okay," Finch said. "We managed to get him into the Mount last March. He's doing much better there. He gets one-to-one attention most of the day, and he likes the food better than at the old school. He prefers their potato salad to Nina's though, and that drives her crazy." Ortiz laughed. "That's good to hear. About the school, I mean. And how long will he stay there?" "Right up to 18. And they even have links with Alvarez College. Some of the pupils there actually do the baccalaureate on day release. So, it's a possibility if he's able. That's great, Ortiz said, looking down at his sandals and flexing his toes. I saw Hector yesterday, Finch said. Yes, yeah, he said he came over. No fear, that boy. He's been showing everyone that tooth you gave him. He seems like a good kid. We couldn't be prouder, Ortiz said, pinching his lips together. A friend of mine runs a farm in Salamanca. He has lots of kids like Brody there, and after they left school, they help out with the animals. He's got goats and pigs and all sorts. He teaches the kids practical skills, stuff within their capabilities, and he pays them a fair wage for it. He's even got a minibus that goes round and picks them up. Kids like that love animals. If you like, I could give you his number, something to consider for the future. Finch pushed a red-tailed dart into the barrel of his pistol, aimed the sight at the tiger shark and pulled the trigger. Ortiz flinched at the sound of the explosion. The dart hit the shark just behind the head. Jeez, you could have warned me, Ortiz said. Sorry, Finch said. While he reloaded, the tiger shark turned on its side, and its momentum carried it to the edge of the pool, where its snout scraped against the curved surface and brought it to a stop. Ortiz held his hands over his ears while Finch fired the second shot at one of the bull sharks. Listen, Ortiz says, I'm going to get out of here while I've still got some of my hearing left. I'll see you in the morning. And as he was walking out the door, Ortiz turned and said, Remember to wear your t-shirt, and gave Finch a big thumbs up. Finch tranquilised the last shark and then set the gun back down on the trestle table. He picked up the t-shirt and tossed it in the rubbish bin. When Finch got home, Nina was asleep on the sofa with her headphones on. The whole downstairs smelled of the chili waiting in a pan on the stove. He went upstairs to Brody's room, leaned down to wipe the boy's damp hair from his forehead and put a kiss there. In the silence, the shock of the tranquilizer gunshot came back to him, along with Doc Ortiz's voice. Kids like that. Back downstairs, Finch lit the gas beneath the pan of chili with a match. He tipped a little salt into a saucer and ripped off small chunks of bread from a loaf to dip into it. Hey, Nina said. She was leaning against the doorframe looking sleepy, her hair all over the place. I was trying to be quiet, Finch said. I was waiting up for you. Finch poured red wine into 2 clay cups and set them on the dining table. Nina sat down and took a drink. So, I saw Juliet today, she said. And how is she? She's a cow. Oh. Brody's been asking to hang out with Rose for weeks now, which is why I invited her over, but Juliet came without her. She said Rose didn't want to come. She went to the beach with her friends instead. Was Brody okay? He didn't say anything, but it just kills me. They were so sweet when they were little. Yeah, well, she's a bitch now. Her and her mum. So, what's she up to? You don't want to know. It'll only make you vomit. Finch reached across the table and squeezed Nina's hand. You and Brody are the only people in the world who don't make me want to vomit, he said. The roads around the bay were glittering, the sun reflecting off the chrome trimmings of hundreds of cars parked end to end, all the way out of town, as far as a mile out, where a line of people carrying canvas bags and cool boxes headed for the lagoon. As they arrived, local restaurant and shop owners welcomed them, standing at the edge of their turf, alongside blackboards painted with special Santa Carla Day deals on souvenirs and drinks and ice creams. There was an air of celebration, everyone happy. At 8 o'clock, Finch, Nina and Brodie went down to the aquarium. Hundreds of visitors always came early to see the sharks before the ceremony started. Nina and Brodie managed the welcome desk. Brodie liked to take the coins and notes from people and sort them into the trays in the till. Finch briefed the 2 extra hands he'd hired, lifeguards from the local pool, which was always closed in the day of the ceremony because they got no business. These 2 young lads leaned against the railings around the shark pool, answering questions that they were able to from the laminated fact sheets that Finch had prepared. Their main responsibility was to make sure that no one did anything stupid, like jump in, or, as happened one year, treat the shallow pool like a wishing well and chuck coins at the sharks. When it was time to leave, Finch stretched up to the top shelf behind the welcome desk to reach the ceremonial box, a weathered old thing with brass hinges, which at one time had held a navigator's sextant. While he kissed Nina on the lips, he felt Brodie fiddling with the box, trying to open the latch. "Not for you," Finch said, and hugged the boy. Down the steps at the edge of the lagoon, where there were already hundreds of people gathered, Finch saw Hector's group, all wearing their red t-shirts. At the centre of them was Doc Ortiz, strutting around, shaking hands and slapping people on the back. Hector was on the lagoon wall with his arms folded, the creases in his forehead visible from way off. His friends fought around him with water pistols. "Where's your shirt, Finch?" Ortiz asked. "I'm on the shark's side," Finch said, getting laughs from Hector's troop, but an annoyed headshake from Ortiz. Ortiz called his son over, and even though it was Finch's job to begin the ceremony, the doc raised his hands over his head to clap, initiating a round of applause that went the whole way around the lagoon. Local notables had already gathered round them, sponsors, prominent businessmen, elected officials, and Santa Carla Day old boys. Finch held the ceremonial box, one hand flat on the bottom, one hand flat on the top, as it was always done, and held it out to Hector's father. "Do you accept?" Finch said. "I do," Ortiz said, the grin falling from his face for a moment of appropriate solemnity. Ortiz took the box, one hand on each side, and then, hands shaking a little, opened the lid. "Did you sterilise this?" Doc Ortiz said, taking out the pearl-handled penknife. "You know, I'd be stripped of my licence if I did a procedure with a dirty instrument." And then he grinned to reassure everyone that he was just teasing. Digging his thumbnail into the groove, Ortiz pulled out the blade. Good craftsmanship and decades of assiduous cleaning and oiling made this a smooth action that finished with a spring-loaded click, locking the blade in place. Excited chatter spread around the circumference of the lagoon. "It's clean enough," Finch said, but Doc Ortiz still made a big show of pulling out a petrol lighter, delighting the crowd as he passed the flame along the length of the blade. "I wouldn't want him to get an infection," Ortiz said, and there were guffaws from everyone within earshot. "Ready?" Ortiz said. Hector nodded. "All set, Finch?" "All set." The clock on the tower atop the public library showed 4 minutes to 11. It was time. "Knock him dead, Hector," Ortiz said. The doc crouched down and marked an area of skin on the side of his son's thigh With his outstretched thumb and forefinger, he placed the blade against them. Hector's mother winced, both fists at her chin. Sweat gathered on Ortiz's upper lip. He drew the blade across Hector's leg in a clean, confident slice. The cut was neat and long, at first releasing nothing, until the leg, as if suddenly realising it was cut, began to leak. Blood dripped down Hector's thigh, over his knee, barely diverted by tiny blonde hairs. Hector held out his hand to Finch, and Finch shook it. The boy's palm was slim and sticky. Ortiz gave his boy the wooden paddle, a weapon gnawed ragged by decades of toothless sharks. Annual sanding and varnishing had maintained this paddle, preserving inside every layer the story of each of the town's top boys since the first ceremony in 1941, the year after the sinking of the Santa Carla, when the sharks had set upon the town's bravest while they waited for rescue, leaving the sea empty, all 71 gone, when the rescue boats finally arrived. Ortiz looked at the clock, now showing 2.5 minutes to 11. "You better move it, Finch," he said. Finch jogged around the edge of the lagoon, back to the aquarium. A sense memory of Hector's hand remained on his palm. He wiped his hand against his shorts, but it could not be shaken. Looking back at the clock, Finch saw that he now had just 90 seconds left. He panicked as the bolt on the gate to the shark enclosure stuck. He pulled the iron mechanism hard enough that when it shifted and his hand flew back, it cut a rusty gash on the side of his forefinger. Over the other side of the lagoon, Hector held the paddle above his head. It bestowed a power upon him that was tangible to everyone. His chest swelled, his chin lifted. Borne on by cheers and whistles, he stepped into the lagoon, striding thigh deep towards the black granite stone set in the middle, his wound twirling red ribbons in the water. The long steel handle of the enclosure's locking mechanism rattled against its fixings as the sharks bashed up against the gate, the tiger shark thwacking it with its tail, the bulls driving it with their snouts. Earlier in the morning, when Finch had first arrived, they had been docile, mooching along with lazy waves of their long bodies. But now, already smelling blood in the lagoon behind the gate, their vigour had returned. Since they'd been caught 8 months ago off the coast of Morocco as juveniles, they'd been fed generous portions every day, building up their size until 3 weeks ago when Finch began to dwindle their rations, encouraging the kind of lusty hunger that you only see in the most desperate wild sharks, the kind that risk beaching themselves in holiday resort shallows for a mouthful of leg and lilo. The clock now showed 1 minute to 11. Hector arrived at the stone in the middle of the lagoon. The soaked lower half of his t-shirt clung to his waist. He set both feet a steadying hip width apart and then, leaning forward, held the paddle in both hands, the way he might a tennis racket. Even from 200 feet away on the enclosure wall, Finch could see the boy's chest rising and falling as he panted, his mouth a tight circle, his gaze on the gate. Finch held up his hand to announce his readiness, and in response, on the other side of the lagoon, coinciding with the last sweep of the second hand on the library tower clock, Ortiz began a countdown. 10, 9. The crowd joined in, getting louder with each count. The sharks redoubled their efforts against the gate, so that Finch had to squeeze the handle to steady it. 0! The bells in the clock tower began to peal. Finch hesitated for a second, then pulled the handle. The tiger shark muscled its way through the gate, pectoral fins scraping against the sides. The two bulls barreled out on its wake. The boy shifted his weight from foot to foot as they came for him, clenching and unclenching his fingers on the paddle. The crowd was silent now, holding its combined breath as the sharks cut a quick path to the boy's legs, spurred on by bells whose ringing at 11 o'clock every day had announced each of the sharks' meals in captivity. 5 seconds into the bells, the crowd found its voice again as the tiger shot straight past Hector, clipping his leg and knocking him sideways. Hector's paddle slap landed in the waves it left behind. The crowd chanted Hector's name. As the two bulls came for him, the boy lifted the paddle high, waiting until the last moment. He brought the chewed end down on the head of the lead shark. The bull performed a tail-twisting break and turn, thrashing up waves which knocked Hector off balance. The second bull shark lunged in, butting him with its snout and taking his legs out from under him. There was a collective intake of breath from the crowd as Hector went down on his hands and knees, his head submerged for a second. The tiger spun a tight circle and launched at his hip, jaws agape. Finch's toes curled over the edge of the wall. Hector jumped up and, in a crowd-pleasing display of acrobatics, grabbed the end of his dropped paddle, spun round, spraying water in a wide arc, and caught the tiger right across the eye with a perfect slap. The shark's eye flashed white with a protective blink, and it slipped past him, undamaged. At the end of Hector's spin, when his momentum ran out, the tiger came back at him, the water making a hollow slapping sound in the cavern of its open mouth. It turned side on to align with Hector's waist, and when it bit, pushing Hector along, hopping on one foot, the foam around him turned from white to red. The crowd gasped. Ortiz looked from his son to Finch. Finch folded his arms. The blood drove the two bulls into a frenzy. They were all about him, tail tips and fins flashing as they took exploratory bites, heedless of the paddle's blows. One of the bulls caught his leg and held it, rolling, trying to tug him under. The roar of the crowd deflated into anxious murmurs. There had never been blood before. Hector's father had one foot in the lagoon and one in the wall. His hands cupped around his mouth to amplify his cries of, "Get up, Hector!" There were 20 seconds left, but already the crowd was shouting, "Get out!" For a moment their encouragement seemed to help, and Hector got to his feet. Half his t-shirt was torn away, revealing for the first time the crescent of puncture wounds, leaking blood down his side. Someone rang the handbell to signal the end of the 71 seconds, and into the silence that followed, the crowd yelled, "Run!" But Hector was deaf to it. His eyes were bulging, lips peeled back from his teeth. Water flew from the paddle as he raised it again, and with the most perfect timing began a fearsome downward stroke as one of the bulls leapt from the water, 2/3 of its long body breaching the surface. Its jaws opened wide. Hector's sopping fringe slapped his eyes as he brought the paddle down right on top of the bull's head with all his weight. The shark hit his stomach and they both went down together. There was nothing above the water but fins. Finch grabbed the gun and the first aid kit and jumped into the lagoon. The water dragged at each of his strides. Hector came up for a moment and everyone heard the breath he snatched before the tiger crashed into him again, collapsing his lungs with an explosive pop. The sound got Ortiz moving, and now others were jumping into the lagoon too, preparing to risk their own lives, self-preservation forgotten, in a wave of solidarity. Finch was ahead of everyone else. He held the gun high above his head to keep it safe from the splashes, lowering it only when he was within shooting distance. Hector came up again, belly first, pushed forward on the top of the tiger's head. The boy's eyes were closed and his arms limp. One of the bulls slipped in from underneath and took the whole of Hector's right hand and forearm in its mouth. It tugged the boy under with a jerk that loosed a cloud of red into the water. When Hector resurfaced a moment later in the pink foam, he was face down. The other bull shark came at Finch from the other side. Finch swung the gun round to meet it. The trigger was stiff and his aim was shaky, but the bull was so close that not even Finch's timidity with the weapon could bungle the shot. His 2 rounds pulled screams from the crowd, exploded into the bull's grey back, drove it under water, out of sight. The shots sent the remaining 2 sharks back towards the aquarium gate. Finch emptied the last 4 rounds into the water about their fleeing shadows. Hector had been face down in the water for too long. Finch took big leaping steps towards him, grabbed his ripped t-shirt, pulled him close, slipped both arms under the boy and lifted him up. Hector's skin was cold. Blooded water clung about the goosebumps. And then Ortiz was there, yowling his son's name, wrestling him from Finch. Finch was vaguely aware of another man at his side. 2 men, all holding the boy up together, shouting instructions. Finch's ears were ringing. He looked down at his feet. He was standing on the black granite circle, and it held him there. Ortiz and the others got Hector to the side. The crowd cleared a space around them. Ortiz clamped his open mouth over Hector's, pinched his nose, puffed air into him, inflated his chest. The body of a dead bull shark floated beside Finch, its belly pale in the red water. Finch watched Ortiz struggle to put air and life back into his son. This is how hard you should have fought for my son when you brought him into the world, he thought. This hard.